Hey everybody, and welcome back to Threat X3 Productions, your home of nerd radio, your national nerd net radio direct, streaming to you live every Sunday. Today what we're going to be talking about is the top 10 PlayStation 1 games. Now this is Nick's top 10 PlayStation 1 games, so this might differ from various other people's top 10. So let's get right into it with number 10, Dino Crisis. I could have said Dino Crisis 1 or 2. I actually like both of them just the same, but if I had to choose, the first one has way more of a survival horror, whereas Dino Crisis 2 does have a little bit more of an action-oriented nature to it. So Dino Crisis, I really like it. It has kind of a wacky story how dinos are somehow taken forward in time to our time, and so then instead of Resident Evil where you have to deal with zombies, you have dinosaurs to play with. The moment where you're going across a glass window and suddenly a Tyrannosaurus Rex bursts through will always scare me every single time, even years and years later. And I just really like the story of it, the characters. There was a little bit of choices that you can make, and it was just overall a great game. Number 9, Legend of Legaia. Legend of Legaia was really cool for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's turn-based RPG kind of nature, but also it just did really different things for combat and the way you leveled up, and just the story overall was just really interesting. I love this game, and it's definitely one that I would go back to over and over again. Number 8, Parasite Eve 2. Parasite Eve 2 is really cool. This is another kind of game that was like Resident Evil, where you have like the tank controls and you're, shooting monsters. But in this one, what made it so interesting is that it almost made kind of a Final Fantasy in modern day, where you could do fire spells and lightning spells and all these things, and then on top of that it had like this kind of infection going on and this government conspiracy and all the different locations that it had. Absolutely awesome to play. Parasite Eve 2 definitely deserves a part on this list. Number 7, Mega Man Legends. Now, your typical Mega Man is a side-scroller shooting pew pew pew, but Mega Man Legends turned this into a big open-world RPG, and going around and literally like looting dungeons and getting these big cartoony bosses. And I think that's one of the things that always sticks with me even to this day was its graphics. It was very cartoony, and it was fully voiced, and the mouths actually moved, albeit it was from Japan, so they're a little off, but still. And everything about this game was so cool. Going back to it now, it's a little harder because like L1 and R1 is how you strafe, and it hasn't aged great, but still just a really good overall game. Number 6, Chrono Cross. Chrono Cross was the first big RPG game that I had ever actually finished all the way through. Its combat system is really cool in the sense of you can make combos. And so there's like 3, 2, and 1. 3 does the most amount of damage, but maybe has the least amount of chance to actually hit. 2 is the medium damage, it has a little bit better chance. And then 1 is obviously the least amount of damage, but you have the most amount of chance to hit. And you can do different combos, and the way each character used their weapons was really cool. But then the thing that kept me coming back was its gameplay and its graphics and just the overall world of Chrono Cross. I love this. Like I said, it was one of the first ones I actually ever beat, but the midpoint twist is absolutely great. So much so that I don't want to give it away. I just absolutely love it. Go check out Chrono Cross if you haven't already. Number 5, Final Fantasy VIII. Now, a lot of people will say that Final Fantasy VII is one of the greatest games of all time. And, I like to be contrarian, so I'm going to say Final Fantasy VIII. And one of the main reasons I really like that, Final Fantasy VII, when they had their characters moving around in the world, it was very much like these weird, blocky-looking characters. Whereas the characters that were in the battles and the characters walking around in Final Fantasy VIII were the same. Put on top of that, its summon system On top of that, its battle system, its cinematics, this entire cinematic area where you're running through a city and a giant metal spider is chasing after you, and it seems to all be seamless. Granted, going back, it might not be as seamless, but it was really cool and I loved it. Number 4, Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid is a game that you watch as much as you play. And I really liked it. All the different little things, like if you have a cigarette in your mouth, you can see a red line, and so that's a laser. You don't want to trip that or else an alarm will go off. The stealth aspect to it, the story aspect to it, everything about Metal Gear Solid is a great game and definitely something I like going back to every once in a while. Number 3, Crash Warped. This is another situation where I could have picked any of them, but if I had to pick one, it's Crash Warped. And I think what I like about it the most is that it turned a game that was just a platformer. I'm jumping over here and jumping to the next thing, and don't fall down. And it turned it into more of an action game. You had certain levels where you'd be in a plane, certain levels where you're driving around, some you were in a submarine, and all different kind of things. It made it feel more like a world you were a part of rather than just levels. Number 2, Future Cop. I know this might be an obscure one, and I don't even know if it's a great game, but it's always something that sticks with me when I think of my PlayStation 1 memories. Future Cop is really cool. So basically you're this mech and you can turn from a mech into a hover drone. And so in the hover drone mode, you're a little bit faster, and in the mech, you're a little bit slower, but you can strafe a lot easier. And it's basically just a shoot 'em up. Just pew pew, get all the bad guys, get the boss at the end, and then move on. But one of the coolest thing about this game, and something that not a lot of people might know about it, is that it actually has one of the very first MOBAs ever created. So there's this game mode in it where you can go up against your best friend or an AI, and it has pretty much a MOBA setup where there's all these different neutral towers. You can go to each of the neutral towers and you can take them over, turn them into your color. Then you can go to an enemy one, destroy it. It'll eventually respawn a neutral one. You can take that over. The basic thing is you get your units that you have to buy and get them over to the enemy base, and then kind of like a MOBA, when you destroy that base, you end up winning the game. And I don't know why, but just for that reason alone, I love the game, and also the story is really fun. Number 1, Brave Fencer Musashi. What can I say about Brave Fencer Musashi? It is such a good game. It's one of the very first action RPGs that I've experienced, and it's still one of my favorites. They've definitely come out with some bangers since then, obviously, but this game was so much fun. The ability to suck up pretty much any enemy's ability and then use them in really interesting ways was one thing. Then you have all the different dragons that you took their powers and then use them in interesting ways, or use them to get to a new area. So it was almost Metroidvania in a way, because there were certain things that you couldn't do until you came back to it. Then you add in the night-day cycle, the fact that you actually have to sleep. If you don't sleep, you'll literally fall down and go to sleep right in the same spot that you're at. Everything about this game is something that I've always loved and something I like to revisit on occasion, definitely. All right, so that is my top 10 PlayStation 1 games of all times. What is yours? Let us know down in the comments down below. Thank you so much for joining us on Threat X3 Productions, your home for nerd radio, streaming every Sunday.